Today, I wanted to actually share a little bit of the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius Antoninus. Stoicism has become a lot more popular, especially around where we live, but the form of Stoicism that a lot of people take is a little bit warped from what the original version of Stoicism was. Of course, me working at a library, whenever I first wanted to learn more about it and kind of understand what people are talking about, I went to the books. So I found the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, and I read them to understand what people are talking about. And what I found was a lot of Stoicism is boiled down to misunderstandings of Stoicism's original roots. It's not about hiding emotions or suppressing your feelings or your thoughts in order to remain cold and distant, which is what a lot of people have told me Stoicism is about. But if you actually read on the original intentions, it's about moderation and control of your emotions, letting the right emotions come to the surface, not allowing things like anger to overtake you, or whenever you need to be serious and hardworking, being able to control your emotions and set aside things like irritation or impatience. It's the ability to self-regulate and guide yourself into what you think is a better life. There's a lot of different ways to interpret all of that, but and that is my interpretation of it, at least. But I thought it would be interesting to read a little bit of the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius and let you hear what Stoicism was originally about from Marcus. And then later on, I'll also do a recording where I share a little bit of the golden sayings of, I think his name is Epictetus. Yeah, the golden sayings of Epictetus, or Epictetus. My Roman and Greek is a little bit rusty, but that is another great source material for Stoicism and Stoic beliefs. It leans a little bit more on the religious aspects in my experience, whereas Marcus Aurelius leans on what a lot of people misunderstand Stoicism as, which is the emotional self-regulation side. So I wanted to start with that one today, and hopefully after a little bit of reading, you may be able to understand it better, and you might want to seek it out and read the rest of it. So here I'm going to start with the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius Antoninus. The Meditations often begins with Marcus's recounting of, I think it's 16 things that he learned throughout his life up to this point. This is how he begins his Meditations journal, where he documents the many things that he's learned through life. And now that I'm looking, it looks like it's 17 things. I'm going to read just this first section, and I may return to Meditations and read a little bit here and there, but for today, that's all that I plan to read. Okay. 1. From my grandfather Varus I learned good morals and the government of my temper. 2. From the reputation and remembrance of my father, modesty and a manly character. 3. From my mother, piety and beneficence and abstinence, not only from evil deeds, but even from evil thoughts, and further simplicity in my own way of living, far removed from the habits of the rich. 4. From my great-grandfather, not to have frequented public schools, and to have had good teachers at home, and to know that on such things a man should spend liberally. 5. From my governor, to be neither of the green nor of the blue party at the games of the circus, nor a partisan either of the Parmilarius or the Scutarius at the gladiatorious fights. From him, too, I learned the endurance of labor, and to want little, and to work with my own hands, and not to meddle with other people's affairs, and not to be ready to listen to slander. 6. From Diognetus, not to busy myself with trifling things, and not to give credit to what was said by miracle workers and jugglers about incantations and the driving away of demons and such things, and not to breed quails for fighting, nor to give myself up passionately to such things, and to endure freedom of speech, and to have become intimate with philosophy, and to have been a hearer first of Bacchius, then of Tandasis and Marcianus, and to have written dialogues in my youth, and to have desired a plank bed and skin, and whatever else of the kind belongs to the Grecian disciplines. 7. From Rusticus I received the impression that my character required improvement and discipline, and from him I learned not to be led astray by sophistic emulation, nor to writing on speculative matters, nor to delivering little hortatory orations, nor to showing myself off as a man who practices such disciplines, or does benevolent acts in order to make a display, and to abstain from rhetoric and poetry and fine writing, and not to walk about in the house in my outdoor dress, nor to do other things of the kind, and to write my letters with simplicity, like the letter which Rusticus wrote from Sinuessa to my mother, and with respect to those who have offended me by words or done me wrong, to be easily disposed to be pacified and reconciled, as soon as they have shown readiness to be reconciled, and to read carefully, and not to be satisfied with the superficial understandings of a book, nor hastily to give my assent to those who talk overmuch. And I am indebted to him for being acquainted with the discourses of Epictetus, which he communicated to me out of his own collection. 8. From Apollonius I learned freedom of will and unevaluating steadiness of purpose, and to look to nothing else, not even for a moment, except to reason, and always the same in sharp pains, and the occasions of the loss of a child, and in long illness, and to see clearly in the living example that the same man can be both resolute and yielding, and not peevish in giving his instruction, and to have had before my eyes a man who clearly considered his experience and his skill in expounding philosophical principles as the smallest of his merits. And from him I learned how to receive from my friends what are esteemed favors, without being either humbled by them or letting them pass unnoticed. 9. From Sextus a benevolent disposition and the example of a family governed in a fatherly manner, and the idea of living comfortably to nature, and gravity without affection, and to look carefully after the interest of friends, and to tolerate ignorant persons, or those who form opinions without consideration. He had the power of readiness, readily accommodating himself to all, so that intercourse with him was more agreeable than any flattery. And at the same time he was most highly venerated by those who associated with him, and he had the faculty both of discovering and ordering, in an intelligent and methodical way, the principles necessary for life. And he never showed anger or any other passion, but was entirely free from passion, and also most affectionate. He could express approbation without noisy display, and he possessed much knowledge without ostentation. 10. From Alexander the grammarian to refrain from fault-finding, and not in a reproachful way to chide those who uttered any barbarous or solecistic or strange-sounding expression, but dexterously to introduce the very expression which ought to have been used, and in the way of answering or giving confirmation, or joining in an inquiry about the thing itself, not about the word, or by some other fit suggestion. 11. From Fronto I learned to observe what envy and duplicity and hypocrisy are in a tyrant, and that generally those among us who are called patricians are rather deficient in paternal affection. 12. From Alexander the Platonic, not frequently nor without necessity to say to any one or to write in a letter that I have no leisure, nor continually to excuse the neglect of duties required by our relations to those with whom we live, by alleging urgent occupations. 13. from Catullus not to be indifferent when a friend finds fault, even if he should find fault without reason, but to try and restore him to his usual disposition, and to be ready to speak well of teachers, as it is reported of Domitius as it is reported of Domitius and Athenodontus, and to love my children truly. 14. From my brother Severus, to love my kin, and to love truth, and to love justice. And through him I learned to know Tharesia, Helvidius, Cato, Dion, Brutus, and from him I received the idea of polity, in which there is the same law for all, and polity administered with reward to equal rights and equal freedoms of speech, and the idea of a kingly government which respects most of all the freedoms of the governed. I learned from him also constancy and undeviating steadiness in my regard for philosophy, and a disposition to do good, and to give to others readily, and to cherish good hopes, and to believe that I am loved by my friends. And in him I observed no concealment of his opinions with respect to those whom he condemned, and that his friends had no need to conjecture what he wished or did not wish, but that it was quite plain. 15. From Maximus I learned self-government, and not to be led aside by anything, a cheerfulness in all circumstances as well as in all illness, and just admixture in the moral character of sweetness and dignity, and to what was set before me without complaining. I observed that everyone believed that he thought as he spoke, and that in all that he did he never had any bad intentions, and he never showed amazement and surprise, and was never in a hurry, and never put off doing a thing, nor was perplexed, nor dejected, nor did he ever laugh to disguise his vexation, nor on the other hand was he ever passionate or suspicious. He was accustomed to do acts of beneficence, and was ready to forgive, and was free from all falsehoods. And he presented the appearance of a man who could not be diverted from right, rather than a man who had been improved. I observed, too, that no man could ever think that he was despised by Maximus, or ever venture to think himself a better man. He had also the art of being humorous in an agreeable way. 16. In my father I observed mildness of temper and unchangeable resolution in the things which he had determined after due deliberation, and no vainglory in those things which men call honors, and a love of labor and perseverance, and a readiness to listen to those who had anything to propose for the common weal, an undeviating firmness in giving to every man according to his deserts, and a knowledge derived from experience of the occasions for vigorous action and for remission. And I observed that he had overcome all passions for joys, and he considered himself no more than any other citizen, and he released his friends from all obligations to sup with him or to attend him of a necessity when he went abroad. And those who failed to accompany him by reason of any urgent circumstances always found him the same. I observed, too, the habit of careful inquiry in all matters of deliberation, of his persistence, and that he never stopped his investigations through being satisfied with appearances which first presented themselves, and that his disposition was to keep his friends, and not to be soon tired of them, nor yet to be extravagant in his affections, and to be satisfied on all occasions and cheerful, and to foresee things a long way off, and to provide for the smallest without display, and to check immediately popular applause and flattery, and to be ever watchful over the things which were necessary for the administration of the empire, and to be a good manager of the expenditure, and patiently to endure the blame which he got for such conduct. And he was neither superstitious with respect to the gods, nor did he court men by gifts or by trying to please them, or by flattering the populace. But he showed sobriety in all things and firmness, and never any mean thoughts or actions, nor love of novelty. And the things which conduce in any way to the commodity of life, and of which fortune gives an abundant supply, he used without arrogance and without excusing himself, so that when he had them, he enjoyed them without affections, and when he had them not, he did not want them. No one could ever say of him that he was either a sophist or a homebred, flippant slave or a pedant, but everyone acknowledged him to be a man ripe, perfect, above flattery, able to manage his own and other men's affairs. Besides this, and honored those who were true philosophers, and he did not reproach those who pretended to be philosophers, nor yet was he easily led by them. He was also easy in conversation, and he made himself agreeable without any offensive affections. He took reasonable care of his body's health, not as one who is greatly attached to life, nor out of regard to personal appearances, nor yet in a careless way, but so that, through his own attention, he very seldom stood in need of a physician's art, of medicine, or external applications. He was most ready to give way without envy to those who possess any particular faculty, such as that of eloquence or knowledge on the law or of morals, or of anything else. And he gave them his help, that each might enjoy reputation according of his deserts, and he always acted comfortably to the institutions of his country, without showing any affections of doing so. Further, he was not fond of change nor unsteady, but he loved to stay in the same places and to employ himself about the same things. And after his paroxysms of headache, he had become immediately fresh and vigorous to his usual occupations. His secrets were not many, but very few and very rare, and these only about public matters. And he showed prudence and economy in the exhibition of the public spectacles and the construction of public buildings. His donations to the people and in such things, for he was a man who looked to what ought to be done, not to the reputation which it got by a man's acts. He did not take the bath at unreasonable hours, and he was not fond of building houses, nor curious about what he ate, nor about the texture and color of his clothes, nor about the beauty of his slaves. His dress came from Lorium, his villa on the coast, and from Lanavium generally. We know how he behaved to the toll collectors at Tusculum, who asked his pardon, and such was all his behavior. There was in him nothing harsh, nor implacable, nor violent, nor, as any may say, anything carried to the sweating point. But he examined all things severely, as if he had abundance of time, and without confusion, in an orderly way, vigorously and consistently. And that might be applied to him, which is recorded by Socrates, that he was both able to abstain from and to enjoy those things which many are too weak to abstain from, and cannot enjoy without excess. But to be strong enough both to bear the one and to be sober in the other is the mark of a man who has a perfect and invincible soul, such as he showed in the illness of Maximus. 17. To the gods I am indebted for having good grandfathers, good parents, and a good sister, good teachers, good associations, good kinsmen and friends, everything nearly good. Furthermore, I owe it to the gods that I was not hurried into any offense against any of them, though I had a disposition which, if opportunity had offered, might have led me to do something of this kind. But, through their favor, there never was such an occurrence of circumstances as to put me on that trail. Further, I am thankful to the gods that I am not longer brought up with my grandfather's concubine, and that I preserved the flower of my youth, and that I did not make proof of this virility before the proper season, but even deferred the time, that I was subjected to a ruler and a father who is able to take away all pride from me and to bring me to the knowledge that it is possible for a man to live in a place without wanting either guards or embroidered dresses or torches and statues and such like show. But it is such a man's power to bring himself very near to the fashion of a private person, without being for the reason either mean in thought or more remiss in action, with respect to the things which must be done for the public's interest in a manner that befits a ruler. I thank the gods for giving me such a brother who was able to, by his moral character, to rouse me to vigilance over myself, and who, at the same time, pleased me by his respect and affections. That my children have not been stupid nor deformed in the body, that I did not make more proficiency in rhetoric, poetry, and other studies in which I should perhaps have been completely engaged if I had seen that I was making progress in them. That I made haste to place those who brought me up in such a station of honor, which they seemed to desire without putting me off with hope of my doing in some time after, because they were then still young. That I know Apollonitus, Rusticus, and Maximus. That I received clear and frequent impressions about living according to nature and what kind of life that is, so that, so far as depending on the gods and their gifts and help and inspirations, nothing hindered me from forthwith living according to nature, though I do still fall short of it through my own fault, and though not observing the admonitions of the gods, and I may also almost say their direct instructions. That my body has held out so long in such a kind of life, and I never touched either Benedicta or Theoditus, and to that, after having fallen into amatory passions, I was cured. And though I was often out of humor with Rusticus, I never did anything of which I had occasions to repent. That, though it was my mother's fate to die young, she spent the last years of her life with me. That whenever I wished to help any man in his need or on any other occasion, I was never told that I had not the means of doing it. And that to myself the same necessity never happened, to receive anything from another. That I have such a wife so obedient and affectionate and simple. That I had abundance of good masters for my children, and that remedies have been shown to me by dreams, both others and against blood-splitting and giddiness. And that when I had an inclination to philosophy, I did not fall into the hands of any sophist, and that I did not waste my time on writers of histories, or in the resolutions of syllogisms, or occupy myself with the investigations of appearance in the heavens, for all these things require the help of the gods and fortune, among the quadi at the granua. And that is the end of the opening to the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. There he lists the 17 things he's thankful for having learned in life that led him to the point where he writes the Meditations. He sits down and decides that he wants to take his self-philosophy more seriously, and the remaining sections is him sharing his wisdoms that he's learned from these people and from life in generally. Most of it was done over the span of many years, where he would sit down whenever a thought occurred to him or he wanted to write something down, and he would journal his meditations. So throughout the meditations, there's points where he says things, and then later he admits that he then disagrees with them. So you really should read all of the meditations to understand his total philosophy, because any one section he may have a good argument against later on. Or he may also have just came up with a better way to word it. Either way, they're interesting. And I see the appeal that people have for Stoicism, and it is interesting to talk about and to understand what draws people to it. And hopefully this was something that could have interested you, and if you're looking for it, the meditations are easily found in most online sources. They're copyright free, and they're online in many places, including Project Gutenberg, which I have often referenced as a place where we can get our stories. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and I should be able to read a few more sections in the coming future. You have a good one.